Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for a little more learning about World War II. So, I know yesterday we learned a little bit about the beginning events of World War II and how that led to the Battle of Britain, led by Nazi Germany's leader Adolf Hitler and his little buddy sidekick Benito Mussolini. And today we're going to dive into the next big step in the war, which is, as I told you last time, Germany's big mistake of invading the Soviet Union since they failed at taking over Great Britain. So let's look at that. And as we get into today, here is our ICANN statement. So by the end of today, and I got two for you today, and I know that's a lot, you should be able to explain, so you could say it with me again. I know it's awkward. But I can explain the German invasion of the Soviet Union, and I can summarize the impact of technology on World War II. Because we're going to kind of briefly look at the invasion of the Soviet Union, and also then we're going to look at some technology throughout. You're going to do a little Duckster's reading on technology, and I think you're going to find that pretty cool. And you're also going to take a little quiz on that, and you'll have a little surprise after that little quiz, something fun that I got planned for you. Hopefully you'll enjoy. So Germany is going to invade the Soviet Union in 1941 after failing to take over Great Britain, as I told you. Remember, the United States, as I said, is staying out of it still, not in the war yet. Keep that in mind. So Hitler is going to decide to invade the Soviet Union in what's called Operation Barbarossa. So this is the Nazi Germany versus the Soviet Union, what used to be called Russia, but you learned hopefully earlier in the year that they were changed to what's called the Soviet Union during World War I when they had this big revolution. So why does he want to take over the Soviet Union? Well, first off, Germany wants their land. They want their resources, meaning especially they want oil. Oil is used for a lot of stuff, but specifically it was used for gasoline to power things like cars, factories, tanks. And quite frankly, he just doesn't like them. He hates the communists, which is what the Soviet Union are called. And you'll learn more about that when you get to what's called the Cold War after World War II. So it kind of looks like this. Remember, this is our map of Europe, kind of, where Germany had taken over basically all of Europe, and they're going to take their troops, and these are their lines that they're going to march. They're trying to get to these main cities in the Soviet Union. One's called Leningrad, one's called Stalingrad, and one's called Moscow. That's the capital. And their goal is they're like, if we can take over these cities, we win. And Germany's army is going to march through the Soviet Union pretty easily. The Soviets can't stop the Blitzkrieg. Remember, we learned about that last class where it's called lightning warfare, where they move super fast through the enemy's lines using things like these dive bombers, which you'll read about today. And they're a type of airplane that swoops in, down, and drops bombs on the enemy. Also, a little bit about the tanks. They had these huge tanks called the Tiger tanks. They called other tanks Panzers, and they were a lot better than the enemies, the Soviet Union. But even though they're able to beat the Soviets' forces, the Soviet army, as they retreat, they're going to retreat back. So the Germans are pushing up this way, and the Soviet army is just falling back. They're retreating. So it looks like they're losing, but they're going to burn everything behind them. They're going to burn their houses to the ground. They're going to burn the crops. They're going to burn supplies, which means the Germans are going to have a hard time finding food and shelter. And I don't know about you, but I don't operate very well when I'm hungry. And I definitely don't operate very well when I'm out in the elements like rain and snow. And I don't know how much you know about Russia, but or the Soviet Union here, it's really cold. So the German troops are going to get really cold really fast. I mean, this is the actual pictures of them marching. They had to put on skis to march through the snow because it was so heavy, and fighting in that snow. So one of the other reasons, and I thought some of you would think this is pretty cool, that the Germans were able to beat them so easily originally is their technology was just better. This is a German tank versus one of the Soviet tanks at the time. And you could see the size difference and the power between them is just huge. So remember the tanks, and then this is an example of a German dive bomber. They call them the Stukas. You don't need to remember that. And these are some of the Soviet Union's planes in a little fight. So because the Germans don't have land, they're in their foreign country, they're in the Soviet Union's land, they don't have supplies, they don't have enough shelter, they start freezing. When the winter comes, they're unprepared. I mean, if you'll notice, and this is kind of sad or gruesome, but you'll notice this is just piles of dead bodies. You notice a lot of them don't have shoes or boots on because other soldiers would have taken those off of them because they needed those boots for themselves because they were so short on supplies. So eventually, the Soviet army is going to get the upper hand, meaning they start winning at the Battle of Stalingrad, which lasts from 1942 to 1943. Now remember, Stalingrad, looking back at this map, is all the way over here, and it's one of the biggest, most important cities in the Soviet Union. But I mean, that's thousands of miles away from Germany. So they had to get supplies all the way from Germany over to the troops there. And they run out of supplies. And eventually they're running out of ammo. They don't have any way to really fight. Went too far ahead there. So the Soviet Union is going to win. And this is a picture from the city. And you could tell the whole city's destroyed, but they're still flying their flag. So they're basically saying, like, you can destroy us, but you can't take away our will. We're still going to fight on. And just so maybe if you've never seen before, just how big the Soviet Union is, which is one of the reasons why they won. So if this is the United States right here, which is pretty big, this blue outline here is the size of the Soviet Union. So you could tell it's way bigger than the United States. So Germany, which is only this big, trying to take on this big of a country, that's one of the reasons they're eventually going to lose. They're just way too big to take over. So some fast facts about this. The Germans versus Soviet Union, which was known as the Eastern Front of World War II, because it's fought in two separate areas, in the East and in the West. You'll hear about the West later, was by far the deadliest part of World War II. 95% of all the German soldiers that are killed during the war were killed by the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union was a big, bad, strong country. Even so, they're going to lose about 23 to 24 million people during the war. Now, those are just numbers to you, but it's kind of like this. That's enough people, basically, if you took every single person in the entire state of South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, put them all together, that's about 25, 26 million people. So that's almost like killing every single person in all three of those states. That's a lot of people. So finally, wrapping up, so what was the United States doing during this point in time? Well, we still are not joining the war, but we are going to start helping out a little bit. We do two things called the cash and carry and the Lend-Lease program. We're going to start to trade with Britain, who's our friend, in the Soviet Union. We're going to start sending them things like tanks and ammunition and supplies like food, because really, we do not want Germany to win. We realize Germany is bad, Hitler is bad, the Nazis are bad, we don't want them to win. So we're going to help out these guys, but we're not going to join yet. But don't worry, because next class, we are going to learn why the United States enters. Spoiler alert, it's something called Pearl Harbor, which I hope you've learned about before. And that's all for today. Make sure you read your Ducksters, take the quiz, and you're going to fill out that flip grid, which is what I'm going to put in at the bottom of your assignments. All right. Y'all have a great day.